All right, so let's get started with our live discussion. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us on our 2023 year-end review and 2024 forecast live discussion on LinkedIn. We have an incredible, esteemed panel of guests today who have a lot of great information to share. Um, and I think this will be a very, very insightful and wonderful live discussion. So let's get started. Uh, as you know, this has been a very um, rocky year with the rates and the way our business has been going up and down. And I think what we should do is to bring in Ron Reamer. Ron is an expert at Citibank who's going to basically give us some great, insightful knowledge about how the mortgage markets have been moving. So Ron, what would you say have been the top strategies that you've employed to deal with the higher interest rates this year?
Well, going into next year, we've already seen one of the most dramatic drops in rates that we've experienced in the financial market. Since the start of November, rates are down about 1%. For every 1% change in rates, it affects your purchasing power by about 11%. So buyers going into the market next year should be prepared for a lower rate environment, a more competitive market. And what that equates to in dollars. So on per 100,000 borrowed, you're going to save from about 665 a month to about 600. So on $1 million mortgage, a customer on a 1% change in rates is saving about $650 a month, which is pretty significant for a lot of clients going into the market. So if they've been pre-approved within the last couple of months, they should definitely revisit their pre-approval, get updated rates. And if you're a first-time buyer that's renting, the rent versus buy analysis and running those numbers, I think is more prevalent now, especially with rates being down, that it can make sense to revisit that conversation and run those numbers to make sure if it makes sense to buy compared to where you're renting today.
Nice. Well, that takes me into my next question. So, it's a new year ahead of us. With all the data that you have now, and you could give us a crystal ball, what would you say buyers can expect financing a home in the new year?
Well, going into next year, it's going to be competitive. I mean, I think spring is going to start much earlier. I've had one of the busier weeks in December that I've ever seen this week with referrals and just that overall activity. So I think if you're a buyer that's going to get into the market, make sure you get your financials in order. If you're self-employed, make sure you get your taxes ready to file on time if you want to use your 2023 numbers to qualify. And I think you have to be open to a conversation with your realtors and your attorneys about your mortgage contingency, maybe lifting that contingency or being creative with that contingency. We just put actually a deal together with your team with Stephen Allen as well, where the seller refused to give a contingency. The buyer wanted a contingency, and we basically were able to negotiate with Gabby's help to get a 1 week contingency. And the bank was able to deliver on that. So I think buyers
awesome.
have to be prepared for that type of market going into next year.
Amazing. Thank you. And it's funny because it's bringing me right into the next conversation, which is we have Stephen Allen here. Stephen Allen from Allen Law PC. Stephen is a very, very seasoned attorney in our industry for many years and has seen all different kinds of markets. He's a veteran of the legal side of our residential industry here. Very excited to have him on. Thank you for joining us today, Stephen.
No, thanks for having me.
So, Stephen, everybody's mind has been sort of, what's happened on the legal side of real estate this year with the escalating interest rates?
Well, it's been a tricky year on the legal side, representing both buyers and sellers, because we got ourselves into this weird kind of standoff between rates going up, so buyers were a little trepidatious about getting into the market, and then sellers having to adjust prices down to kind of deal with the anxiety that these buyers are having, that if the Fed sneezes, the rates are going to go up by another percent. So what happened this past year was we were kind of stuck with both sides essentially dragging their feet. Buyers were taking longer to sign contracts because they were holding off just to make sure that the rates didn't go up in between the time they did an offer and in between the time they signed a contract. And then on the converse of that, sellers who kind of thought, hey, look, I'm giving away the farm a little bit here because I had to adjust my price. I'm going to drag my feet on my end just in case another person comes in and kind of, sweeps the deal off of everyone's feet in the 11th hour. So it was very interesting because it had to deal with knowing which side of the deal you're on, knowing how to best kind of address your client's needs, and then also too dealing with the timing of everything. So that was basically the byproduct of the rates escalating at the way that they did, and everyone was just worried that it would keep going up. But Ron, amazing that the rates have gone down a full percentage point since November. I think that's really going to take us into 2024, and we're going to have a much better go at it as a crew out there.
Wow. So what would you say buyers and sellers should be looking out for in 2024 when looking at the legal side of buying and selling real estate?
Sure. I think what buyers and sellers need to do, especially now in the December months, and if they know they're going to be buying a place, in 2024, someone has a New Year's resolution, they want to be in a new apartment, or they want to sell their apartment, on top of also hitting the gym every day, which is, unrealistic for me at least. What I basically tell clients is, regardless what side of the table you're on, do your homework. Do your homework going into it. Know what your borrowing capacity is as a buyer, and as a seller, know what you're selling. It's interesting to say this, but you need to have difficult conversations with people the minute that you actually sit down with them to represent them on either side of the transaction. You need to know what it is you're selling. You need to know basically what issues that particular unit has had. You need to know the monthlies, because at the end of the day, when you present that to a buyer, and God forbid something actually changes or something wasn't accurate just because it's slightly dated information, you don't want to lose that buyer. And then on the converse of that, you need to have a buyer kind of know, hey, look, I'm going into this transaction and this is what my buying power is. Also, I need to disclose to everyone in this transaction at the end of the day that I can meet my deadlines and that I can meet my paperwork and that I can deliver when the time is called. So know who it is that you're working with, get all of the information as soon as you possibly can, have the difficult conversations. I'll give you just one example. We're in December right now. You're going to see deal sheets go out. Hopefully a lot of deal sheets go out between now and the end of the year, fingers crossed. But what you just need to realize is, simple fact of the matter is, buildings increase their monthlies January of the next year. So just right then and there on your deal sheet, you may possibly have dated information. So try to smoke out those problems. Obviously, they may not want to share these pieces of information with you, but you kind of have to say, look, in order for me to represent you in the best way possible, and for you to buy this apartment or for you to sell this apartment as quickly as humanly possible, there is a paper thin margin of error. So we need to make sure the info is correct and communicated in the best possible way that we can to the other side.
Wow, that's amazing. Thank you. I've done many deals with Steven where we've had situations like this, and he's been able to get ahead of these problems and help us through the issues before they arise. So thank you, Steven. So our next guest is one of my favorite people at Douglas Elliman. I get to see him on a daily basis, and he brightens up my day. Such a nice guy. So intelligent, so much great data to share with us, and always gets us out of all the wonky situations when it comes to leasing. Leasing in Manhattan, as you know, is a very hot topic right now because it's been climbing so fast. And this was the first time, I think, in a long time that it started to cool off, which was surprising to see. But I'd like to bring our next guest on, Hal Gavsey. He's our Executive Vice President of Residential Leasing at Douglas Elliman. Hal, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. I thought you were talking about Yuval with that nice. Honest with you. But thank you. Good to see you.
Yeah. So Hal, what's on everyone's mind is, what happened? What were the factors that led to the cooling off of the rental market this year?
Sure. I think really what we all saw was, for the past 2 years, landlords were really in the driver's seat. Rents every month we saw new highs. Inventory was extremely tight, and days on market was very low. We had properties moving within, just record highs. and just such a rapid pace. And I think what we finally saw was really the rental market plateauing. We noticed that in about August, where things started to slow down and cool off, and rents have since August continued to come down. We're down probably about 10 to 15% from our highest points. However, keep in mind, we are still about 10% higher than where we were pre-pandemic
Wow.
levels. So, put that in perspective, rents are still very high in Manhattan. But we definitely, I think renters were just really starting to push back, and these numbers were unsustainable and are unsustainable. So there wasn't a correction, but we are definitely have seen a bit of a reset. So I think that's really what we noticed and what began in August, and that's continued. Seasonality is finally back to the rental market, meaning the softer parts of the market being through October through we're going to see October through March, where again, going back during the pandemic and for the past 2 years, we really didn't have any seasonality. Inventory was just so tight that the market was really a landlord's market, and landlords were getting the prices that they were asking for and shooting for the stars and getting it. Now we're seeing that correction or a bit of an adjustment, and I think that's going to continue.
Interesting. So, speaking from, your very, very informed level, I'm sure anybody who's out there who's thinking of leasing would love your guidance as to what are the best strategies. If you're a landlord, if you're a tenant, based on everything you've seen this year coming into the new year, what would be your best advice?
Well, I think on the landlord side, I think landlords just still have to wrap their heads around the fact that they're no longer in the driver's seat. And I think that's going to continue at least through the first 6 months of the year. I think we'll probably see rents maybe come down slightly or kind of go sideways. And landlords just have to accept that and understand that the 2 years that they've enjoyed the rents that we've seen, that's gone now. So adjust. We're going to see more concessions come up. We've already seen that starting in October, and that's going to continue. So I think on the landlord side, and for us as brokers, we just have to really have our conversations with our landlords and make sure that they understand the market, and what renters want to see and what renters are looking for. So it's really going to come down to adjusting the prices and just wrapping their heads around that. On the renter side, they're in the driver's seat. I think they will be for the next 4 to 6 months, which is a good thing as inventory increases and will continue to increase. So I just think it's for the renters, that's what they're really going to see, that they're going to be able to reap the benefits, so to speak, of the next 4 to 6 months. But again, keep in mind, as I said before, the rents are still pretty high, comparatively speaking. So, I don't think I personally don't think we're going to hit a recession. So I don't think we're going to see rents really come down dramatically. If we see another 5 or 10%, that would be expected. And I think that would be very helpful to the market.
Interesting. Thank you.
Yeah.
Wow. That was great. So, thank you, Hal. So our next speaker is somebody who, I've been in Douglas Elliman now almost 20 years. And from the day I started in the company, this man has, mentored me and taught me a lot about what I know, and turned me into the broker I am today. And always excited to hear what he has to say. We're saving sort of some of our firepower regarding the sales market next. So I'd like to introduce you to Yuval Greenblatt. Yuval is Senior Managing Director of Operations at Douglas Elliman. And, for Yuval, I'd like to ask him the hard questions. So, Yuval, everything we've heard from Stephen, from Ron, from Hal, I'd like to ask you now, what are your thoughts about the coming year? I mean, everything that you've seen on the sales side, how would you characterize 2024 as a seller's market or a buyer's market?
Right. Thank you, Iman. These are always great to do with you and the rest of the panel. We've done these a couple of times. And I think that the information that you provide to the public is very helpful. And, you gave me sort of a trick question because everyone thinks that the answer is generally cut and dry. But it's not always really. I guess the actual answer is it depends. And it depends on a lot of variables. I mean, coming out of 23, for the most part, it's been slightly on the side of buyers, but then even then, it depends on precisely what you're looking for. The market above 5 million has been much more of a seller's market just because of how little inventory you have that's in move-in condition. And that noisy data sometimes confuses expectations and may confuse the public because this year we've had record sales over 70 million, sales over $10,000 per square foot, and a couple of trades. It's a small part of the market, but it is it tends to get the most attention. The market below 5 million is leaning more on the buyer side, in particular if the buyer is willing to do work. But that again can switch because there are variables that we're not necessarily in control of, such as interest rates that have been discussed, by Ron, and in the negative side of interest rates earlier in 23. But now you've already seen, I'm getting emails. I think Ron sent me one. Jumbos are approaching 5% again, and if the Fed continues to do what they are saying that they're going to do, they could drop precipitously, and that then reactivates buyers. Deals start to change, but at the same time, you could also get sellers adjusting to that. So sellers that have been waiting, to get their price and have been lowering prices, they may at some point, just say, hey, these rates, it might impact my pricing to the upside now. Maybe I should wait. And that'll work for sellers that have finished apartments. But if apartment needs work, if apartments need work, it's a whole different ballgame, right? Because it's expensive to renovate. So again, it's a bit of a loaded question, but I do believe that right now is an opportune time for any buyer that's sort of been on the fence. The only negative is that there isn't a ton of inventory out there, and there aren't really great drivers of inventory out there. Construction is fairly quiet in the city. It's tough to build. It could take several years to get new inventory into the marketplace. But if you're willing to take on something that needs a renovation and kind of know what you're doing, you could take advantage of interest rates that are very likely to go down. And I think smart money is going to really start to look to get aggressive into this market. And we've seen a surge in activity in December, which is normally a fairly quiet month. So some big contracts have been signed. It's still cash for the most part on the condo side. It was as high as 70% of deals were cash. Now it's like in the 60% range. But this, lower interest rates are activators of buyers, right? Everybody wants to take advantage of that type of environment, and we're already heading into that environment. But the only thing that might hurt on that side is that the inventory is still relatively tight if you're looking at finished inventory. Overall inventory is pretty flat and should continue to go down through the beginning of January. We'll probably have under 6,000 units in the city by then, which is kind of what it was last year. But I do believe that if buyers are serious now and they have been looking at something, they should really strongly consider jumping in, because if rates do continue to come down, you might have a refinance window in 2 years where you could take advantage of both lower price and lower rate a little further down the road.
So marry the property, date the rate, right? That's the phrase that's going around. Take advantage of the market basically, and then refi.
Yeah, because we see that bias, or at least according to what Powell at the Fed has said, is that rates will come down, and also, of course, if rates do in fact come down, I mean, he has not lowered rates yet. He left rates flat, and he was basically referring to the Fed funds rate. But I think the new Fed funds rate target was under 3%. It's not directly correlated with interest rates, but you could already see just that messaging has driven the 10-year today. I think it's a new 1 year low. I think it was below 3.9. Right, and to 10 years really more in line with where mortgage rates sort of line up. But remember, if those rates come down, then also construction lending comes down. That could get some developers back into the mix, make it, the opportunity could arise for some, for more development, more supply side inventory to get pushed into the marketplace. Although you still have the other, the bureaucracy of building in the city is still difficult. Finding the land is difficult, but there are always sites, and there's also redevelopment, right? There are always, maybe there's been some talk about commercial buildings converting. They don't all work, but there will be some good commercial conversions, and most would go rental for the most part. But if rates do come down, construction lending rates also come down. So that it might drive them back into the condo market, because low interest rates generally push pricing higher.
Interesting. Wow. Thank you. That's amazing. That's amazing. Thank you so much, Yuval. It's always such a pleasure to hear what you have to say, because you see it from sort of like the because you see what everyone's doing in the, in our company, and kind of how things are moving. You see the levels. So that's great. That's great. I just want to say that, we have such a great brokerage house and so many very, very talented people that work here. But I have to say that, Gabrielle Correo is a very, very valued member of our team. Gabrielle is a wonderful person, personally and professionally. I can't think of a better person to work with on deals. We work together here at the Bacadari team, and she does tremendous work working with buyers. So I think it's helpful to hear from like the upper level, senior managing, director side, but also to hear from the ground on what's happening. So Gabrielle, thanks so much for joining us today. And I think it'd be very helpful to hear a little bit from you about sort of like what happened, looking at sort of 23 in review. How can you characterize kind of what's gone on, and how the rates have affected the business?
Thanks, Iman. Yeah, I think I'll be echoing a lot of what Yuval said, but buyers are very reactive to the interest rate environment. So during 2022, we saw those rapid increases in interest rates, and I feel like a lot of buyers hit pause on their search. I had some buyers that wanted to buy, but then the properties that they were looking at just became, out of reach, out of budget because of the high monthly payments. And then coming into 2023, there was just no real sense of urgency because of the high interest rates. And on top of that, there was also just not a lot of good inventory. So buyers were just not feeling encouraged. But then I also had other buyers that took advantage of the situation in the market and bought because they realized that it was the right environment to get a good price. So they found a great property. I had a couple that found a really great property at a great price. They probably wouldn't have gotten that price if it weren't for the high interest rate environment. And so, like you said, marry the property, date the rate. So they just figured, we'll refinance down the line when that opportunity comes. But at least they got the property that they wanted. And then in the second half of 2023, I feel like things really started stabilizing and buyers just got used to this new environment that we're in. And more recently, the rates have started to come down just a little bit. So, now I have buyers that just went into contract on a really beautiful co-op, and they got a great deal on it. And the rate that they just locked in is lower than what they were originally quoted for when they got their pre-approval with Ron at Citibank, just a month ago. So they're very happy about that. So I have a feeling that a lot of buyers are going to be calling me next year. And I just feel like there's a lot of pent up demand from people that, did hit pause on their search, and they're going to want to be coming back into the market to find properties. So I guess my pro tip for buyers is, if you are in the market to buy next year, as rates start coming down, as we're expecting them to, the more they come down, the more competitive the market is going to be. So the earlier you can transact, the better. If you can do it before the fall of next year, I think you'll be in a really good place as a buyer.
Oh, very good. That's very good. Very succinct. Thank you, Gabrielle. That's and then, so I guess to summarize what you just described is kind of how 23 went. So will 24 be the year to buy?
Yeah, absolutely. So, if the rates are going to come down as we're expecting them to, I think that you'll be in a position to take advantage of an environment where people are, like I said, not really expecting there to be a lot of inventory, but you might just find the right property. And as things start coming on the market, sellers are going to start putting their apartments on the market because they've been holding off as well. We'll see more inventory, but there's sort of a pocket of time before we start to see a real improvement in interest rates where it's going to be a buyer's market. So absolutely. So Iman, to turn the questions over to you, how would you advise sellers when dealing with the high interest rates in 2023? How were you advising your clients?
Oh, well, thank you for asking me. Yeah, it's it's interesting that sellers, in 2023 were kind of you know trying to plot their course and what is the right direction to go. Getting all these messages from the Fed, the rates escalating, definitely affected buyer traffic. I think we had more paralysis, let's say the latter part of 22 when the rates were escalating. I think in 23, we started to see a bit more of a direction in the fact that there wasn't going to be any, let's say economic catastrophes. There were some people that bought regardless, from us when, some of the properties we had for sale. But I feel like the market really opened up in the latter part of 23. I think that sort of like the summer, I think people kind of took a little bit of a breath and realized, okay, the Fed is kind of cooling off on raising their rates. And we were able to actually get properties in contract. We had a very, very busy summer and very busy fall coming into the winter, and pretty much sold all our inventory. So I think it was the year of correction, meaning like sellers really kind of understood what is it they had to do in order to make their deals. And echoing what you've all said, properties that needed renovations performed very differently based on their strategy. So, for instance, some of the sellers were reluctant to want to do anything to their properties and listed their properties to the market and ended up negotiating a bigger discount off their sale price for a buyer to come and sort of inherit the problem. Other sellers that actually did invest in doing the work they needed to actually ended up ahead. So it was an interesting year when it came to strategy on how to list your apartment, how to get the highest price for your property.
Right. Great. So then for 2024, do you forecast 2024 as a good seller's market?
I feel like you said a very interesting word. You talked about pent up demand. And I think that, the relationship on buying and selling kind of intercorrelate, and actually rentals also get affected by this as well. And when I say that, I'm talking about the fact that a lot of sellers actually are looking to buy. They're looking to upgrade, looking to move neighborhoods, whatever the case may be. And if they're in let's say a 3 or 3.5% interest rate, and the rates were touching 8%, let's say earlier this year, they were like reluctant to want to make a quick move. Like, what's the rush? Let's see if rates cool off. So next year's rate environment looks like it's going to open up a lot of our pent up demand for sellers who want to sell their properties and buy something. And also the market stabilizing from a pricing standpoint. It just feels like a very good market as far as what the conditions are when it's connected to selling your property for a good price, getting a very good price on your property. I think what's not going to change in the new year is definitely the fact that anything that you need to do for your property, you should definitely do. Any of the renovations you have to do, any of the furniture editing, any of the staging. And of course, that's what we do best. You need to hire a top broker who understands the market, and that's how you can navigate a sale. But I would definitely say that's the way to go.
Great.
Well, I just wanted to thank you all today for this incredible discussion. I learned so much from you, and it's funny because I learn a lot from you guys every day because we work together on a regular basis. But, being able to capture this in a 30-minute discussion was exceptional. So, Hal, Ron, Yuval, Stephen, and Gabriella, of course, thank you all so much for joining us today. And this concludes our live broadcast today. If any of you would like to hear more from any of our experts, please feel free to contact us at the Bakadari team at element.com. We're happy to set you up with Ron Reamer, with Stephen Allen, of course, and of course here at Douglas Elliman, all of us here, we would love to talk to you as well. So thanks again. Thank you, everybody. And hopefully have a wonderful new year. Enjoy the holidays, and see you very soon. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Happy holidays.
Happy holidays.
Thank you.